Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Smol Bear and Pickles show. I'm your host, Alex S. Johnson, aka a small bear, and my co-host, who is unfortunately encountering technical difficulties, is the lovely and extremely talented Aaliyah Celeste Williams, aka Pickles. And we had rehearsed the Smol Bear and Pickles show theme song. So just going to do that a cappella and solo. So yeah, brace for it. Okay. Do 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 do. Small Bear and Pickle show. Yay! And there was much rejoicing. So our guest today is none other than Mimi Pond. Now that if that name doesn't ring a familiar bell, it's because you have been out of it under a rock, culturally speaking, for the last, I don't know, 30 years or so. I mean, she has been longer than that. She has written for the National Lampoon. She has written for the Village Voice. She has written for 17 magazine. She has is an award-winning, critically acclaimed author of several graphic novels, among which are Over Easy, The Customer is Always Wrong, and her latest book, which is called, I just happen to have it right here in front of me. It is called Do Admit, The Mitford Sisters and Me. And the Mitford sisters were this iconic sort of aristocratic. Um, oh, yes, did I mention a little something called The Simpsons? Well, we'll get to that because we really want to get into the heart of the matter, which is the Mitford sisters. And they're this extremely interesting kind of aristocratic family in the 1920s and 30s in England. And some of the sisters went the the fascist route. Some of them became involved with Nazis and Hitler. And one of them became a communist, and one of them became an author and went to America. And so the Mitford sisters' lives are kind of intermingled with Mimi's sort of coming up, coming into her own as an artist, and her sort of her seeing the Mitfords as kind of aspirational for in her life growing up in the American Southland in the 1950s and 1960s.
By Southland, you do mean Southern California, right?
Yes, yes. I think thank you for the clarification. Yes, the
Because
Southland.
my husband's from the South, which is Chattanooga,
Oh, Chattanooga. Yeah,
Tennessee,
yeah,
but
Chattanooga.
I'm from San Diego.
Right. Yes. Thank you for that clarification. Since I've spent like 20 years in Southern California, I just think of it as my second home. And so, among the people who have blurbed this book are none other than Alison Bechdel, as in the Bechdel test. That is the test, the very famous test um, to see whether or not I believe it's for a woman comics artist or a graphic novelist writes a story in which features women, whether or not there's their relationships are mediated through men or through other women, and that's the Bechdel test. I'm in
Well,
my
I think that applies to just about everything. I think it applies to movies too.
yes.
Like, is there a movie with two women in it where they just don't mention men?
Right. Yes, exactly. And what do you, this is a really interesting sort of, topic. Mimi, what do you think as far as like, TV shows or films or books where that pass the Bechdel test?
Oh, there's not that many. That's a good question. Um, huh. I mean, there's my favorite thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. Um, that doesn't really talk about men. It's mostly her. Well, it's this the story of a young girl who's trying to get to the bottom of a mystery involving her neighbor. So there's not too much in the way of, talking about boys
Right.
beyond monsters. That is.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I was just thinking of a really good example of something that not only passes the Bechdel test, but in its own right, I believe a classic, of the graphic novel genre. And I think of Art Spiegelman and Crumb. This is my like short list of greatest graphic novelists. And Kate,
Flattered.
oh, well, you're welcome. You deserve it. Kate Beaton, who is also published by Drawn and Quarterly, her novel Ducks
Yeah,
came out, I believe, last year or the year before.
I think it was the year before. Kate
Yeah,
Beaton. Yeah,
that was Kate Beaton. Yeah, I have to, of course, mention Mark Bell. And I'm not wearing my Mark Bell t-shirt, but we did go to lunch with him about 4 months ago. And another Drawn and Quarterly guy who I forget his name. And anyway, so yeah, Ducks is incredible, right? Like talking about the tar sands in was it in Calgary, I believe,
yeah,
right, where she was working on the tar sands and in a very, very oppressive, very, very, male-centric kind of
yeah,
job, which was extremely dangerous and facing, this very brutal and traumatic, but at the same time, I found her surprisingly, compassionate towards these men, and I think that.
yeah. Really, she really was considering.
Yeah. Considering everything, like,
Yeah,
yeah, and her her way with a line is like I I hope that maybe we could connect up another time to have Pickles on if you're up for that, because Pickles is a remarkable artist herself, and as far as strong female artists, so. And speaking of lines and graphic techniques, your use of blue wash is so interesting. It's so unique. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Matisse in a way, if that
oh,
makes
that's interesting.
sense. Yeah, you know, and like it's easy on the eyes. It's very attractive. Um, I love the blue wash too, says Pickles. Yeah. So how did you when you were getting started? So when in your kind of career, as and we're coming up as a student, you went to, I forget the name of the art school you went.
California College of Arts and Crafts.
California College of Arts and Crafts, exactly. And when did you find yourself kind of coming into your own with your own distinctive style that's recognized now?
Well, I was always doing comics and I wasn't getting any support for that in art school. I mean, I was roundly poo-pooed for wanting to make comics when I
Right,
was in art school, which is ironic because now they offer a graduate program. You can spend probably more than $50,000 a year for a 2-year graduate
right,
sequential comic art program to be in, and
right.
then graduate and make no money. I mean, God bless them. At least they got with the program. But I mean, yeah, I was developing a style pretty early on.
Yeah.
I'd say starting in art school with that.
And I guess a cliche question, but it's always a good one. Who were some of your biggest influences? I know Charles Adams is certainly, you know, pretty.
Yeah, I mean, early on, people like Charles Adams
uh,
and George Booth and Sam Gross and
right,
Sherry Flanagan, who became a great mentor of mine, and Crumb, of course, was like the
yeah,
gold standard back then for
right,
anyone. And yeah, I mean, but a lot of stuff from childhood too, like children's books, like speaking of Small Bears and Winnie the Pooh, uh, E.G. Is it E.G. Shepherd? Um,
hmm.
who illustrated not only Winnie the Pooh but also The Wind in the Willows,
Yeah.
and then his daughter Mary Shepard, who illustrated Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Um, all that actually with the Mitford book, looking at English children's book illustrators of that period was a big inspiration because I wanted to evoke that kind of very English kind of feel to it. Like I just thought, what would make it seem more English? And I was looking at them, and I discovered some wonderful English illustrators I hadn't known about before, like Edward Artizone.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's this kind of very cozy feeling about the work.
Yes. What was it that initially attracted you to the Mitfords as a subject, coming off of the the memoirs Over Easy and The Customer Is Always Wrong? Because it seems like a bit of a leap.
Well, yeah, I mean they'd been a hobby of mine for a long time, and frankly, I had been reading so much about them that I was beginning to threaten my marriage by talking about them too much, like at dinner parties, to the point where my husband was like ready to throw me out. And I finally thought, well, I've got to channel this in some way. And by doing so, I started diving deeper and deeper into not just the Mitfords, but the entirety of 20th century history. And it became like the back door to 20th century history for me. So, and since I went to art school, I really didn't have a great history education. So it was really helpful to read a lot of books about what was going on with the First World War and the between the wars period and the run up to World War II and how it all happened. And it's all, of course, happening again.
Right. Yes.
Uh,
Beautiful.
and it's interesting. And then you've got, just like you have today, you have families um, arguing with each other because they're on opposite sides
Right.
of the debate.
Yeah.
And back then it was easy to see how people got lulled into this sense of, well, we didn't know what fascism was then. It seemed like a reasonable, sensible solution to some people. That Hitler chap's got a lot of good ideas,
One might almost
but
think,
now there's no
wow,
excuse.
right? Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. It is history repeating itself, but kind of like I've always said that that Trump is kind of like a Brundlefly between P.T. Barnum, Hitler, and Homer Simpson. I mean, he's not that smart, and so
No,
but
no,
he
it's
is
not.
extremely capable of doing damage. I just I find the phenomena to be perplexing, and maybe in your travels and your scholarship, have you found any kind of maybe explanations, possible historical explanations for the Trump regime?
I don't. I'm baffled. It's I think I'm naive in that I had this view for a long time that everyone was possessed of a certain native intelligence, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think some people are just really fucking stupid.
Thank you. Thank you for using the appropriate, Anglo-Saxon vernacular too. Yeah, exactly. So really fucking stupid. So how so you were kind of growing up in the Southern California area, as distinguished from, say, Tennessee. And so what was that like? I mean, it must like in the your in your kind of coming of age memoirs, you really, I think, very poignantly and very like as well as I've ever seen it. I mean, like James Joyce, you kind of evoke that sense of yearning for to be part of the big city, to be part of the world, to be part of, going to concerts at, you know, I can never pronounce it, but something Mojave Way Gardens with the dead Kennedys, and
Oh, I went to the Mabuhay Gardens. It was boring.
it was boring. Yeah. So
I mean, I'm not a late night person. I'm not a club person.
yeah.
I was better off waiting on those people that had been out all night than I was actually going
Yeah.
to clubs. I
So
mean,
yeah,
occasionally it was fun, but I've just never been one for late nights standing around in a loud club.
yeah. Exactly. And I've spent quite a a good deal of time in rock and roll, and including backstage with Motorhead, etc., and Marilyn Manson, and it's just as I think it's as boring and ordinary as it is exciting and glamorous, so I certainly can attest to that, like there's only so much of that really it's mostly just the glamour of it that people are
I mean,
attracted
there's one thing, the performance on stage is one thing, but to be backstage or in proximity to, the band or whatever,
to.
there is this really annoying thing that happens where everyone is jockeying for
Right,
position.
exactly.
I'm with the band.
And
And it's so tiresome. It's like everyone's like desperately trying to one up to each other on like who's cooler. And that's like part and parcel of youth. It's like, trying to prove that you're cooler than the next person. And I'm so over that at this point in my life,
exactly.
way over it.
Right, way over it. Yeah. Me too. I mean, I had that experience, so I don't have to ever kind of jockey for anything. In fact, I never had to jockey for anything, which is which is really awesome. But so like I mean, just what was it like, in the I don't want to make you feel older, but like in the 50s, what, like the image I get was sort of maybe a very truncated cartoonish image. It was like everything was like Eisenhower, and it was drab, and it was the man in the three-piece suit, the gray flannel suit, his corporation man, and then all of a sudden you had like the Beats, Kerouac, Ginsberg and Burroughs, and all of a sudden you had the hippies and whatever. And it was sort of like the psychedelic revolution. Like, what was it like for you growing up in Southern California and during that?
Well, I mean, I was 4 years old in 1960, so I didn't so much experience the 50s as I
Right.
did the 60s.
Yes.
Uh, and what I always point to is that when the Beatles first came on Ed Sullivan,
Yeah.
if you watch the whole show, which you can do now on DVD, that they were preceded by essentially 19th century vaudeville acts. And when they came on stage, I just know that we were all in our living room and we were all standing up because we were in such a state of shock. We had never seen anything like it. It was as though they had pulled a 727 jet onto the stage of the Ed Sullivan show. I was like, the jet age arrived
Yeah.
just then. That's what it felt like. It's like nothing before that made any sense, and now we were in the jet age.
That is very, very interesting. And I am going to now mention The Simpsons. I'm not going, we're not going to dwell on it, and certainly I'm going to respect your feeling about that experience. But I just want to ask you, like, what was it like to, you very famously wrote the first full-length episode of The Simpsons, which was broadcast in 1989 and made television history and cultural history. It's called Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire. What was it like getting into the mindset of those archetypal characters?
Well, it was the first episode, so I had no idea what it was except that I'd seen the shorts
Yes.
from the Tracy Ullman show. So I had no idea, and I had to be guided by the writing staff on like what was going on with these characters.
Right.
And they just said, "Do you want to write a Christmas episode?" I said, "Yeah," because I hate Christmas. So yeah. And then I wrote it, and suggestions were made, and I took the suggestions, and of course there was rewrites like there is in every single
Yeah.
TV show ever written, and the rest is history. So I was in on one writers meeting, and that was it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. I can't tell you anything else.
I know it's insane that they would throw you under the bus like that, but their loss. And then,
It's not insane. It's life as we know it.
okay,
It's misogyny in America.
exactly, exactly. And it's wrong, but it is what it is. And I was just about to say, I was been thinking about this. Like if you'd been accepted into the boys' club, then we would have lost a lot of Mimi Pond stuff, which is really valuable. So, um,
Yeah, so fuck them.
fuck them. Thank you. Right, fuck them. Right. So, now, you've written for some other like amazing, iconic shows like Designing Women. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I came on Designing Women when I had a 3-month-old son, my first child, and Linda Bloodworth Thomason was off winning the election for Bill Clinton, and the inmates were running the asylum. And Jean Smart was already gone, and uh, who else was gone? The Delta Burke was gone, and they had brought in Jan Hooks, who I thought was brilliant, but I wasn't getting any sleep. I was sleep deprived. I'd never worked on a TV show before as on staff, and
Yeah.
I'd never had a baby before, and I was absolutely miserable. And at the end of like the trial period, they didn't renew my contract, and I was so relieved because I was so wretchedly unhappy. And every idea I pitched to them had been done in like season 2 or season 3 or season 5, and I pitched an idea for Jan Hooks to be at the center, and then they said, "Oh, the network doesn't like Jan Hooks." I'm like,
Wow.
and it was a educational experience, but it was like the wrong place for me to be because at that point, no one else there on well, no one the head writer had kids, but they were older, and no one else had kids. And people would just like amble in at 9:30 or 10 and then work until like 6 or 7 at night, or on taping night they'd be there till like midnight, and that just wasn't going to work for me.
Right.
And it just I wrote one episode that I still get little residuals for,
Mm.
and I wish it could have been a happier experience, but it just wasn't the right time. It was educational to watch people work. The actor who played Anthony, whose name escapes me at the moment, was very kind to me, and so was the actress who was in Dreamgirls, who played his girlfriend. I wrote an episode for them, and they were both just as sweet as they could be to me, and everyone else was perfectly nice too. It just was like bad timing.
Yeah. What was it like on working with Pee Wee Herman?
Well, see, that's what ruined me for writing for
Okay,
television,
wow.
and here's why.
I'm striking that.
Lynn Stewart, rest in peace. We
Yeah.
miss her madly. Lynn Stewart and I, Miss Yvonne, and I wrote an episode, and it was called Rebarella. It was about Reba, the mail lady, is concerned because she's got a date with Derek the fireman, and she's really nervous. And Miss Yvonne takes her under her wing and makes her over to look exactly like Miss Yvonne.
Right.
And they go on on a date together in the playhouse, and it was really fun. And here's what happened: they took our script and they shot it.
Okay.
They just shot it. I thought, oh, this is the way it works. This is great. I want to work. I want to work in Hollywood. This is going to be this is going to work out so well.
Right.
And yeah, that's how it went.
Wow.
I mean, that was the beauty of working with Paul.
Yes.
My husband was a production designer and a puppeteer on the Playhouse, and it was the beauty of his working with everyone that worked on the Playhouse, is that he trusted people to do their jobs,
Yeah.
and he didn't try to get in their way, and that's why it all worked so beautifully.
Yeah. Did you work with Rob Zombie at all? Because he was on that show too, I think, for a while.
No, he was like a receptionist on the at Broadcast Arts in New York on the first season.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
That's all he did. He just answered phones.
Okay. So that's because he's tended to play that up. And okay, so National Lampoon, what was that like? Because that's
Well, that was another Nasty Boys Club. Again, Mike Reese and Al Jean, who I worked with at The Simpsons, were at the Lampoon when I was, and I think they were predisposed to dislike me because it was also a boys' club. And it was okay, but looking back, it was kind of horrible. And when I look back at old issues of the Lampoon, I'm so embarrassed, and it's so utterly cringe-inducing what passed for humor. Then it really has not aged well,
oh, yeah.
not in the least.
Yeah. Yeah, right, right. Oh, say, so I want to talk about so I want to shift gears to some awesome, amazing women cartoonists that we all love. The late great uh now Aileen Kaminsky Crumb, who
Yeah.
who was on board as editor of Weirdo and kind of completely remapped that. She was also part of Twisted Sisters collective, right? And she and another one of my favorites of all time, Dory Sita. So did you know any of these people, or did you? And
I didn't really. I mean, I knew Aileen and Crumb.
yeah,
I mean, I had a passing acquaintance with them. I met them when I still lived up in the Bay Area, through Bob Armstrong, who was in the Cheap Suit Serenaders, and of course the brilliant cartoonist behind Mickey Rat and the Couch Potato Handbook.
exactly.
And yeah, so Bob Armstrong's still a good friend. And I knew Mary Kay Brown, who I met from at the Lampoon, and who was um, a great role model for me, a great inspiration. Her work is just absolutely gorgeous. She was married to Cliben. Uh,
Oh wow.
um, yeah, a lot of people don't know that, and they divorced, I believe, because she was invited to go to LA and write on a TV show with like Bill Murray and some other people, and he said, "Well, if you go, I'm divorcing you," and she did, and he did. Um, or it was something very much like that. So yeah, they parted paths early on, but she's absolutely wonderful. I love her work.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I mean, she does stuff for like Mine Shaft. She still does, right? And
If she has, I haven't seen it.
oh, okay. Yeah. Mine Shaft is really interesting. Right. I mean, and it's so quirky. It sort of like looks like this amateur little zine or something. But it's got, its Crumb is regularly featured, and they got, Justin, what's his name?
Justin Green.
Justin Green. Yeah, the late
Yeah,
great.
I knew him too.
Yeah. You've had and you're one of the kind of, I guess, pioneers, along with Gabrielle Bell, of this sort of, for women doing it for themselves with this kind of semi-autobiographical auto fiction, graphic, graphic novel memoirs. Could you talk a little bit about what that's been like as far as being a pioneer and kind of, shaping that whole genre?
Um, I don't. I mean, with Over Easy and The Customer Is Always Wrong, it just was this story that had been with me from the first day I worked at the restaurant. It's like it just jumped into my chest, like in Alien, and was trying to burst out for a long, long time. And it was like you went to work in this place, and you looked around and you said, "This is a story. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I'm going to figure it out. And sometime at some point, it's going to come out." And um, I could see it all in my head, and I just was so intimidated by the idea of. Yeah, I thought, oh, no one could possibly draw that much. That's crazy. I'm going to write it as a conventional piece of fiction. I thought a movie script first, but then I lived in LA long enough to realize that you could, you could write a script and it could easily never see the light of day. So I thought, oh, well, I've done publishing, I've done books. Maybe if I just write this as a conventional piece of fiction, I can get it published. And my agent couldn't sell it. And I finally had to break down and admit to myself that it wanted to be a graphic novel because I could see everything. So I already had the story. I just had to throw out all the beautifully crafted sentences I'd written describing things and draw them instead.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of you in that, but there's also a persona. It's also in many ways it's kind of metafictional. Maybe, you know, I'm sort of going out on a limb here, but it sort of feels like a lot like Gabriel Bell, who plays around with autofiction a lot. What percentage of that character is you?
I mean, I'd say it's all me. There's a lot of the story that is and that is uh, exaggerated or fictionalized.
Yeah,
And there are a number of characters who there were so many people that worked there that I kind of had to like combine three fry cooks into one fry cook, and seven waitresses into three waitresses,
sure.
and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's pretty much all me.
Yeah. I seem to recall that you in the first book you actually befriended Tom Waits. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I did in real life. Yeah,
Yeah,
and he was a great mentor to me. I mean, it meant the world to me that he liked my work and that he had confidence in my work.
yeah,
That was huge for me. And I lost touch with him after I moved to New York, and I like for years I was like, why can't I get in touch with him? Does he hate me now? Oh,
right,
and I
yeah,
finally like that worked for me at the time. I don't really need it anymore. I've
yeah,
like kind of put it aside because it was like, I don't need his approval anymore. I've got the confidence. It's like Dumbo and the feather.
yes,
It's
yes,
exactly like that.
yeah, 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 and he's very much one of those people like Burroughs, like Laurie Anderson, uh, Bjork, who kind of uh, who 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 defined not only defined an entire era, but sort of seems to be their own genre. My
Yeah.
my Tom Waits is Ellen Mabey, and we're never gonna like lose track of each other because that's a permanent love, and we're mutual friends with Aaliyah Pickles, and sort of like I come out of like I rose to prominence such as it is. Nobody's ever heard of me or watches the show, but through Beyond Baroque, in Venice Beach, and I was brought on board with by Ellen Mabey, and then you know emeritus executive director of Beyond Baroque, Richard Modiano, they're still friends of mine, and I publish them as well. So it's a really kind of a neat full circle for me, being able to still like have these renowned cultural figures as actual friends and people who
Mhm.
supported me, and now I can sort of repay it by publishing things. I just wanted to show you something. I think you'll get a kick out of it. This is one of the books that we put out, and it's called White on White, a literary tribute to Bauhaus. So we had on board here some incredibly remarkable people
Mhm.
who some of the people who kind of are responsible for, popular culture as we know it. For example, Carrie Lee Crum founded The Runaways, an original poem or slash lyric. You know, David J. Haskins, who founded Bauhaus and Love and Rockets. John Shirley, who wrote the Crow movie. Jarbo, who's like a goth industrial pioneer, and Ellen Mabey, who's lauded by people like Henry Rollins, who also publishes her. And so, having a chance to work with all of these people, I feel is a very, im- it's very important to be able to like pay tribute to the people who formed your sensibility, in many
Yeah.
respects. Could you speak to that?
Well, yeah. I mean, Tom Waits was a huge influence on me because his songs are so observational. There's so many great descriptions of people and characters and places
Yeah.
that's completely evocative, and his songwriting, his musicality is so sophisticated. It's very Tin Pan Alley, or it
Yes.
was. I mean, now it's gotten like it's like just off the charts, experimental, crazy stuff that's fascinating. But really, it's very sophisticated.
There seems to be a lot of kind of crossover, a surprising amount of crossover between, the different arts. Like for instance, David J. Haskins, he's not only the bassist for, Bauhaus and Love and Rockets in his own bands and his collaborations, but he's also a fine artist. He's a DJ and he writes plays, and he's fascinated with, you know, figures like Edie Sedgwick, you know.
Oh, uh-huh.
Some of our other friends include like Tony Zanetta, who kind of was responsible for creating the Ziggy Stardust persona,
Hmm.
and he ran Main Man Entertainment. So, some of these people that we work with, Aaliyah and I, are extremely influential. But it's surprising. It's always surprising to me when I talk to people who are so influential, to talk about, for example, when I interviewed Tony, and he's saying David this, David that, and I was like, it really brings it home. That's, beyond just the you know the superstar. It's David Bowie, David Bowie, and this is a human being who crafted a persona that that we all sort of bought this. We bought their propaganda for
Hmm.
David. And what is it like for you as far as, I mean, you have your Mimi Pond, you're an individual, but you're also kind of a cartoon character, and you're also a persona that has a second life. What is that like negotiating between your different selves?
I don't see it as different selves. It's not like I mean,
I'm not saying you're like bipolar or anything. I'm just saying that it's like there's these interesting facets of one person, I'm saying.
Um, I mean, it's all me. I, I
Yeah.
I don't see it as playing roles in different situations because
Right.
I'm not. I know you'd like to think I'm famous, but like people really don't know who I am for the most part. And I spend 90% of my time trying to justify my existence to people who don't know anything about comics.
Wow.
And so, when I meet people who are familiar with my work and the world of comics in general, I'm just grateful.
Yeah.
A lot of people just can't seem to get a grip on the idea that you'd be a woman of my age who's done comics. It's just like doesn't.
Why is that so hard? I mean, in this day and age, why is it so hard for people to accept? And what is it about comics in particular that people say, "Oh, Mimi Pond couldn't have done comics"?
Well, I mean, it's just because people don't know about comics and they don't understand. It's such a niche world. It's like you either know about it or you don't.
Right.
and there's people who they think, oh, I said, well, I'm a cartoonist. Oh, like in the newspaper, would I've seen it in the newspaper? I'm like, no.
Oh,
I mean, I used to do a lot of magazine work, but now I do web comics and I've done some graphic novels. What's that? Oh, well, it's like a comic book for adults. It's like kills me to have to explain it over and over to people,
right. Yeah.
and yet that's my life.
Right. So that's interesting. And I think because growing up with my dad, Stephen M. Johnson, who is I guess cartoons and comic books and graphic novels have always been played a huge role in my life.
Oh
So
yeah, mine too. I mean, my dad put the Bantam paperback of, I mean, maybe signet paperback of, collected Mad from the EC Mads
yeah.
in my hot little hands when I was 6 years old, and he was showing me Pogo and Little Abner, and I had bound collections of New Yorker cartoons and Pogo, and on and on, and that was just my life, was just eating up all this stuff. So um you know, it's just, it's either a world or you don't.
Yeah, I
And
kind of
then, comics just get a bad rap because, people have dismissed them for so long as being, just throwaway trash. And they still don't get the respect in the United States that they get in other countries.
Yeah, have you ever seen the movie Creep Show? Um,
No.
okay. Well, it starts out where this kid who's actually portrayed by um, Joe King, who's Stephen King's son, who later went on to become Joe Hill. He changed his name, and I've been published alongside him, oddly enough. He plays this little boy. He was about 10 years old at the time, and his father is very anti-comics. And this is sort of it's kind of addressing the whole, the EC, the comic scare and the whatever the seduction of the innocent, Frederick Wortham. Um, and so so he says so throws this this comic book in the trash, and then the sort of this witchy ghoulish kind of skeletal figure comes out of whatever manifests and wreaks horrible revenge, and it's Stephen King and it's George Romero, and it's a great film, extremely entertaining. But I think I so I always got the impression, but maybe just because I'm part of a comics family, that graphic novels especially had a lot of, cultural clout these days, especially, well, we had the whole controversy with Mouse being banned in some school districts. So that got a lot of, sort of a little more coverage of people, more people were aware of, of Art Spiegelman's work because of this insane censorship, of a Jewish man's memoir about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
But it seems like so how would you if you were so inclined, maybe you're not, but how would you try to sell um graphic novels as a serious art form to somebody who is skeptical? Maybe you don't want to do that, but say, yeah.
I mean, you either like comics or you don't. I mean, um, it's interesting. Most people have a basic understanding of how to read comics from having been exposed to them as children. I only met one person who was a neighbor of mine in New York in the 80s, who was a Polish concert pianist, and she had never been exposed to comics,
Right.
had no idea how to read them. Like she didn't understand. Like there's a certain language, or around you know like using asterisks and
Yeah.
different keyboard symbols for swearing. That's
Right.
just one example
Yeah.
of the kind of comics vocabulary there is. And I don't. I mean, I don't feel like it's my job to proselytize.
Yeah.
I'm not an educator. I don't want to teach. I've never wanted to teach. I don't care.
That's fair enough. Fair enough, maybe. But that kind of reminds me because one of the things that Crumb has always said is that, people that one of the things he's always said about that he's never felt the need to justify comics as an art form. And he especially says he loves the fact that comics are a little bit sleazy, that it's not a highbrow form. At the same time, we have things like one of my favorite all-time, graphic novelists is Daniel Close. And
Mhm.
and he's really amazing, like just amazing storyteller and
Yeah.
amazing guy. And so there was a few years ago, they came out with a special edition of Ghost World, which with all these scholarly appendices and essays that were written about invoking sort of this Freudian whatever Freudian jargon and so forth, which I thought was absolutely fascinating because it was fully annotated too. So it had all of the cultural references. And I realized that things that we kind of take for granted as kind of like, references to, 1950s and 60s TV shows, for example,
Mhm.
or popular toys, that they're actually part of cultural history in the same way as, Marcel Duchamp. I mean, it's not, and so I've never seen too much of a distinction between, say, the fountain, the Armut, fountain, like the Marcel Duchamp's urinal, that he installed in the Armory show in 19 whatever it was, 1914 or so, and comic books. It seems to me that he and later, Warhol and Jasper Johns, people like that. And then there was that guy who kind of does, named Philip something or other, who kind of does paintings that are sort of highly,
Philip Guston.
yes,
Philip Guston, yeah.
yes,
And don't forget Lichtenstein ripping off everyone.
Lichtenstein ripping off and everything. And then there was like, what was that, like Diebenkorn, and then there was who did Erased, it was a Erased Diebenkorn or something like
Oh, Klaus Oldenburg.
Klaus Oldenburg. Yeah. So I love the fact that in postmodern art and pop art, and that there's a lot of references to comic books. So it's interesting to me that as far as, scholars of just aficionados of art in general really appreciate comics, but it's like, I guess it's the hoi polloi, which you would think would be the most, would have the the biggest fans of, graphic novels, or be most, sympathetic to the idea of comics as high art. Maybe we don't want them to be a high art form, but I think they certainly are.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what it all comes down to essentially is drawing. Drawing to me is everything.
Yeah,
And I'm much more moved in museums by drawings than I am of, elaborate paintings.
yeah,
I mean, I appreciate them for sure, but drawings I'm connected to because I draw,
right,
and to see like even, like sketches of Michelangelo's,
right,
actual pencil sketches, it's like the hand of God in a way. It's like he made that mark
right.
on that piece of paper with that crayon or pencil or whatever. It's like that's him. That's him. He's right there. It's so immediate,
Yeah,
and it's so exquisite when you capture a the essence of something with a gesture, with a simple gesture. I mean, that's what gets me all, hot and bothered.
me too, me too. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it kind of reminds me, you're probably familiar with Walter Benjamin's, essay on the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, right?
No,
Or
sorry, you lost
you're
me.
not. Okay. I'm getting all highbrow and highfalutin. Well, he basically talks about how in before mass reproduction, you had the aura of the singular artwork. You had to go, I mean, there were mass produced prints and stuff in, like, in France in the 19th century, but which became its own art form. But before that, you had to physically stand in front of, La Gioconda or the Winged Victory or whatever it was,
Mm.
and experience that. And then with mechanical reproduction, he basically talks about how, um, I forget exactly how he does it, but sort of like how mass reproducibility of an image, like, alienates us from the thing in itself, and it leads to things like fascism, which is essentially a bait and switch, for, like, you think you're getting, a classic example is like the Nuremberg rally, and Hitler's Nuremberg rally. It's a spectacle, right? It's eye candy, right? And actually sort of like, filmmakers like Lenny Riefenstahl. Well, I'm kind of fascinated by Leni Riefenstahl. I should really write a novel about her because, I think that one thing I'm fascinated about her work is that it's gorgeous. It's enthralling. It's eye candy. I mean, she innovated so many techniques like aerial photography and all these things that were sort of instantly recognized from, like, the Super Bowl. We don't even put together that the person who was responsible for all those techniques was Hitler's favorite filmmaker, right? And so in putting everything in a single frame, you in Do Admit, you you talk about, the rise of fascism. What were some of like the most fascinating um like sort of discoveries that you made about that period?
Well, for one thing, Hitler and his cabinet had a way better grip on aesthetics than our current administration does, in terms of, like, they had they had the whole Third Reich handbook. They had a style book for
Holy,
everything. They had, like, everything, being German, everything had to have a certain look, and it was all in a book of, like, exactly how all the logos should look on all the different banners and all the different posters. And if it was a long shape, it had to look like this. If it was this way, it had to look like that. And that, people have gotten mad at me, but they had the best tailors. I mean, there's a reason why Nazis are make great villains, because they look like great villains. I mean, they had, like, the uniforms are like, forget it. Hugo Boss was their tailor.
what?
Literally,
Literally,
Hugo Boss
yeah,
was their tailor. I mean, they just look good,
right.
and it was appealing to people.
Yeah.
People said, I want to look like that. And, who wants to look like Trump supporters now? Who wants to look like Trump and his cronies? Like, that's what I don't understand about it, is they all look like shit.
Thank you. Yeah, my friend, the late great Lemmy Kilmister of Motorhead, he was infamous for having a large collection of Hitler memorabilia, Nazi memorabilia, and he was, kind of fascinated from a historical perspective. But he was the opposite of a Nazi. And when people asked, he said, "Well, they're just, they're fucking, brilliant. I mean, the fashion, the clothes, he had this big collection of like these, not what it was, the Hitler Youth daggers, the Hitler Jugend, you know, and I saw him when I was like backstage with Marilyn Manson, and then out comes Lemmy, and he's wearing the full, Nazi regalia, and he wasn't not afraid to just be himself. You know, I think we need more of that, of people just being honest. I mean, you seem like really fucking cool because you're honest.
Well, I mean, yeah, I just want to reiterate, in no way
Yeah.
do I condone
No,
it. I'm
no,
just
I'm
saying
not.
they had a superior design sense.
Yes, yes. I'm not in any way, shape, or form condoning Nazism. Certainly the opposite. And I'm a peace and love freak. I'm total leftist. But it was some of these paradoxes of just reality. Is that there's something very attractive about fascism. I mean, to the point that there's an entire sub not there's subcultures that are, in like, fetish subcultures that are into Nazi stuff, right?
Oh,
And
here's a funny story.
yeah,
Oswald Mosley and Diana Mitford's son, um, his name will come to me. He became the head of Formula One racing in Britain.
yeah.
He, in the 80s or 90s, I think he was accused in the tabloids press of having participated in a sex orgy where everyone was wearing Nazi uniforms, Nazi regalia, and he sued the newspaper, and he won because he said that although they were like Nazi-ish, they weren't actually Nazis. They were just, it was just, consensual sex play, and it wasn't about being a Nazi, but actually it was, but he won anyway.
Right.
Oswald Mosley, his father, was the head of the British Union of Fascists in the 1930s, and tried to get Hitler to back the British Union of Fascists, but Hitler never gave him any money. Mussolini did, but no, Hitler didn't. And he and Hitler never got along because they both wanted to be the big, you know, the big cheese, and Oswald just couldn't quite deal with the fact that Hitler was a big success and he wasn't.
Yeah. What do you think was okay, so we've talked a little bit about the orange one. What do you think other than the fact that well, there's no comparison. I mean, why was Hitler so charismatic?
Well, apparently he was a very charismatic speaker.
Yeah,
Um, he had a charisma that people bought into. I mean, um, he told people things they wanted to hear, just like Trump does now. I mean, he simplified everything. It's us against them. We have a common enemy. It's the illegals.
right.
You know, it, it's the same thing. Jews, illegals. It's like and this fantasy that we can go back to this past that never was of 1950s with everyone's it's like this movie fantasy of the
Right.
1950s where everyone's white and dad wearing a suit and mom's a happy housewife.
Yeah,
It's garbage.
right.
And people want to believe that.
Right. Like, what was it? Mama's Little Helper, right? Popping Dexedrine and just like, yeah,
Well, my mother, who was a 1950s house and 60s housewife, said she felt like she was always being watched.
right. Yeah,
And she probably was. There's that kind of judgmentalism. It's happening again with social media where mothers feel performative, like they have to their Instagram moms and their lives have to be perfect and their children have to be perfect,
right.
and they have to be an influencer, and trad moms.
Grandmoms. Oh my God.
Yeah, there's this whole movement of women who want to be traditional housewives in that respect, which is also like good luck with that, ladies.
Well, there was that guy Ben Shapiro, Ben Shaps, and his sister, who is kind of looks exactly eerily like him, only like with long hair, which is sort of ironic in many respects because of they're so anti-trans or whatever. But she is a trad mom and she has her own YouTube stuff that she does. She's eerie because she's also an opera singer, but she's an off-key opera singer. I mean, she's
Oh, that's
she's
funny.
she's like she has all the pipes and everything, but she's like horrible. She has a tin ear. And she's also kind of plays into this whole one of the really weird things about one of the weird things about the MAGA people is that they're kind of fetishists about things like, foot fetishes and stuff. And you froze. Oh dear. So, um, this is awkward. I'm just going to wait to see if Mimi Pond is going to unfreeze. And then Aaliyah is missing in action. So, I'm going to give this about not too long. So, anyway, this seems as good a time or a note to end on as anything. And we lost the feed from Mimi Pond, and now we have Aaliyah, aka Pickles, but Pickles is missing. I can't see Pickles' face. So this is really like a worst case scenario for a bear, small bear, kind of trying to do a show and with Small Bear and Pickles show with muted pickles and frozen Mimi Pond, a frozen pond, right? So, oh no, right? Oh no, Mr. Bill, oh no. So, since it's unlikely that we're going to retrieve Mimi,
This meeting
oh, okay, there you are. Um, because, oh dear. So, um, Pickles, Pickles, Bear, Bear, um, Pickles, Bear. So this what? Yeah, so this is about as well as I thought it was going to go. Actually, I'm surprised that I got through an hour without any sort of disaster or, and asking an embarrassing question and her saying, "Never talk about that. I never talk about that. How dare you?" You know, I'll never speak with you again, right? So she seems awesome, and that was a really good show. That was an hour's worth of quality show I can salvage. Um, what's that, Pickles, my dear? Um, so this is surreal. So anyway, this has been Alex S. Johnson, aka the Small Bear, and this is Aaliyah Celeste Williams, who's who I think is drawing me now. Um, and no, no, you're not drawing me. Okay, so you did you drew Mimi Pond. Wow, that is good. Yeah, you drew Mimi Pond. Wow, yeah, that's so you should send that to her. Yeah, that's amazing. So I'm gonna, hey, hold that up again, so I want to take a screenshot. Okay, no, 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 no. Yes, no. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're gonna you're gonna finish. Okay. Okay. This is Pickles. This is Pickles at work. This is a Pickles at work. I've never seen anything quite like her before. She's amazing. See, this woman, man, she's so awesome. She's so awesome. She's one of my favorite people ever. I think broke the mold. Yeah. So even muted a Pickles is fascinating. Muted Pickles is still a savory pickle. Pickles is my favorite ever person. Favorite person is my Pickles. Pickles is my heart. Heart, oh, Pickles, got a bear's heart. Yeah. Wow, that's really good. So could you just hold it there a little bit? Because I want to take a screenshot to use as our cover. Okay. And just keep it there a little bit. So yeah, that's amazing. I'm gonna use that as a cover. Yeah, it's so good. Okay. Yes. So what I want to do now is kind of, there's no way to gracefully, I mean, the show itself went fine. It's just that there was kind of a technical oddity, and Pickles is still working. Yes. Pickles, my favorite, miss my heart. She's got a bear's heart. 'Tis a little bear heart. It belongs to Pickles. That's you. Boop. Yes, yes. Bear heart. Boop. Okay. We're too cute. Okay. I'm gonna end this broadcast so I can upload it, and then in all its messy glory, an amazing exclusive interview with Mimi Pond, one of our most distinguished novelists of our time, and certainly a Bear's favorite. And then you and I can convene and talk on video on on right on Facebook. So I'm just going to close this out. So this has been Alex S. Johnson, aka the Small Bear, and this has been the Small Bear and Pickles show with Aaliyah Celeste Williams, who you cannot hear, and and Eisner Award-winning Eisner Award-winning graphic novelist Mimi Pond is portrayed here by Aaliyah Celeste Williams, aka Pickles. So, okay, that's it. That's a wrap. See you soon. my heart.